Do you wonder if you're the best version of yourself? This is the question we seek to answer in this podcast. We reveal information that helps you recover your health and become resilient. Modern life makes us fragile. Our diet, lifestyle, and environment set us up for failure. We do not accept this. We seek optimization. We strive to become dynamic. Hey, what's going on? Dr. Chris here. Today I want to talk about recovery as in HRV status and vacation, because I just came back from Brazil. I was in Brazil visiting my extended family on my wife's side of the family for the past 3 weeks. Had an amazing time, and I wore my Oura ring, which I've been using for several months now, and I've kind of fallen in love with this ring, and I track recovery through this. Is the most important thing to track, in my opinion. And so I wore it down there, and I was surprised by the results. But first, let me talk about the trip, and I want to debunk a few myths about Brazil, by the way, and I'll start with that. So first of all, they speak Portuguese, not Spanish, and Spanish and Portuguese are pretty different languages. Everyone says, oh, they're similar. Yeah, there's similarities, but you can't really go down there speaking Spanish and expect that people are going to understand you. Maybe if you go to like Santa Catarina or Rio Grande do Sul, some of the southern states that are closer to Argentina, chances are they speak Portuñol, which is basically a blend of Portuguese and Spanish. You might be able to get away with it there. But where my wife's family from, the capital, Brasilia, one of my buddies came down with me one year, and he speaks fluent Spanish, and he was speaking to the family in Spanish, and they had no idea what he was saying. Another myth, well, maybe it's not a myth, but my wife and I frequently hear this, oh, but Brazil is so dangerous. I've been there 7 times now. I've never had one issue, never felt threatened at all. I've felt more scared in LA than any place I've been in Brazil. Now, I will say that I go down there with my wife always. She speaks Portuguese fluently, so that absolutely helps. We are around family a lot too, so that absolutely helps. And we tend to be in smaller places, towns, and cities. I've never been to Sao Paulo. Apparently that is kind of dangerous. I've been to Rio de Janeiro, or Rio as they call it. The R is often an H in Portuguese. By the way, that means the river of January, Rio de Janeiro. Never had a problem there as well. But it's just like a lot of places. Bigger cities where you're going to find more problems, more hustles, and things like that. And there's so much more to Brazil than Rio or Sao Paulo. It's a beautiful country. There's so many things to do. I personally like going to smaller towns and smaller cities than the big, glamorous cities. I love Brasilia. It is a big city. It's super clean, super organized. Never had an issue there at all. Every time we go to Brazil, we go to Brasilia first. So I've literally been there at least 7 times. It's also not just hot there all the time. Everyone kind of thinks that too. It's a huge country. So it's like the United States. It's got all kinds of different climates. Obviously, the closer you get to the equator, the hotter it gets. You get down towards Argentina, it gets pretty cold. In fact, it's such a big country that if you subtract Alaska from the United States, it's bigger than the United States. It's literally most of South America is Brazil. It's a huge country. In fact, we flew into Brasilia, as we normally do, which is smack dab in the middle of the country. And let me tell you something about Brasilia, because that's really interesting. So, many decades ago, maybe 50, 60 years ago, I can't remember exactly how long ago, the capital used to be Rio de Janeiro, and the president at that time said he wanted a capital in the center of the country. So he found a place he liked, he saw a nice view with a mountain and a lake, and he said, here, this is the spot. And they brought in contractors, and they built Brasilia, they opened it up, and people moved there. And it's because of that, it's really well organized. And in fact, if you look at Brasilia from a bird's eye view, you can just Google image this. It's in the shape of an airplane. So the main center is like the fuselage of the airplane, and then it has wings as well. It's pretty clear to see. So anyway, we flew into the center of the country, and we did several stops going north. Our final destination was this place called Lençóis Maranhenses. Sorry if you're Brazilian and hearing me pronounce that, I probably butchered it. But my wife has like tons of cousins, like hundreds of cousins scattered around the country. So to get to Lençóis, we made several stops on the way. So we did something like a 5-hour drive the first day, and then stayed a night in a town called Hias. Then we did another 9-hour drive to a town called Pedro Alfonso, and then another 12 or so hours to a city called Baja de Corda, and then another 12 hours to Barreirinhas, which is where Lençóis is. So let me tell you about Lençóis. Lençóis means blankets in Portuguese, and this is basically a desert of beautiful, pure white sand, so fine. In fact, when we got there, my daughter said, "Daddy, is that sand or snow?" That's how it is. Anyway, so these rolling dunes, and I guess they kind of look like bunched up blankets. Maybe that's why it's called that. I'm not sure. And they have 2 seasons like we do in Florida, wet and dry. So at the by the end of the wet season from all the rain, basically the valleys of these sand dunes fill up with water. So these lagoons everywhere. So if you go there in the beginning of dry season, it is absolutely stunning. As far as the eye can see, beautiful white sand dunes filled with these like emerald green or emerald or blue lagoons of pure, clean, fresh water. And it's shallow too, so it's really warm. There's literally like no life there besides birds and minnows. And they do a great job at protecting it, so there's not like trash everywhere. It's so pristine. Google image what this place looks like. We all were saying it feels like we're on a different planet. The most gorgeous place I've ever been to in my life. So it was quite the trek, something like 35 or more hours in the car, plus a flight back to Brasilia before we flew back to Miami. And I'm telling you all this for a couple reasons, but that's to illustrate just how big Brazil is. We basically did the equivalent of driving from Florida to Maine, starting from the center of the country. So it does that. It repeats the same thing in the other direction, too. That's how big this country is. But what I'm really getting at is what I was surprised about, my recovery scores, my HRV scores. So as a refresher, HRV is heart rate variability. You're supposed to, at rest, in a parasympathetic state, have variance in your heart rate. As we become more sympathetic, the heart rate becomes more consistent. So you can check in on how your nervous system is, and aka how recovered you are, by how high or low your HRV is. So in other words, the higher HRV, the more recovered you are. The lower it is, the more sympathetic and less recovered you are. Really reliable metric, and in my opinion, the only metric I really care about is the reason I got Oura Ring. And as I said earlier, I've been using it for several months now. And I found what so many other people find is the things that tank your HRV or your recovery are stress, lack of sleep, and alcohol. And what I had sort of surmised before this trip was that probably sleep was the biggest determinant in how high or low my HRV is. Alcohol probably next. And then you sort of had this like background of sort of psychological stress that probably plays a role to some extent. But I kind of thought it was in that order. And what the data told me was pretty much the opposite. Stress, psychological stress, is huge. So we did go to a wedding in Brazil when my wife's cousins got married. So alcohol was definitely involved. Sleep was like horrific, as it normally is when you travel. Between flights, all the driving, there was a lot of days we got up at 3 o'clock in the morning because we had a 12-hour drive ahead of us. So there was even a couple nights where I had 1 to 2 hours of sleep. And my HRV was above baseline on those days, even with the alcohol and lack of sleep. But the one thing that I was not having was the psychological stress. As a business owner and a father and all the other things in life, I sort of have this, I guess what I'd call like a chronic low-grade background stress that you basically subtract when you're there. I've come to realize that just how bad stress is. I think we all know stress is bad for you, but I think it's underestimated. And I can confirm this with some sort of self-studies and in one studies I've done on myself with glucose monitors, so wearing a CGM. The same thing. Of course, diet has a huge role on your blood glucose, exercise, things like that. There's things that raise and lower it, just like HRV. But the thing that surprised me most was how high my blood sugar got when I was stuck in traffic. So the psychological stress. That blew me up more than anything else. To put that all into context, for my HRV to be decent when I'm home and working, I have to make sure I'm sleeping well, avoiding alcohol, cold plunge, sauna, do all this recovery work just to stay above baseline. I think that's in part why so many people these days are into the whole cold plunge sauna thing, is because we're just chronically stressed. And obviously not everybody's a business owner, not everybody's a husband or wife or father or, mother. There's a lot of things that stress us out in the way we live these days. One of the things is I just had my phone in airplane mode most of the time, well, all the time, because I didn't want to get the charge of roaming fees. And so my phone wasn't blowing me up all the time. That alone is, I noticed how much better I felt from not being constantly pinged. It's unfortunate too. It's, I've been talking about for a long time trying to do like a digital detox. It is hard to do. I've been thinking about getting a landline phone, and just on Sundays, no cell phone. If someone needs to call me, they can call my landline. But I haven't pulled the trigger on it because it's just too hard these days to operate in society without a cell phone. A lot of places use QR codes for menus. Lyft, Uber, all these things require a cell phone. And unfortunately, it's just stuck with us now. I'm not sure what the answer is. I definitely think getting away from the cell phone more often is a great idea. Putting the phone on silent, turning off all the notifications you don't need is a good idea. Keeping the cell phone out of your bedroom is probably a great idea, which I'm going to do. I'm going to buy an alarm clock as soon as I get off this podcast and start charging my phone in a different room. I think that's a great idea. And I'm going to take a page out of the book of Brazil, Take Life a Little Less Seriously. A ship in harbor is safe, but that's not what ships are meant to do. What does this mean? It means exposing yourself to difficult situations so you become resilient. If you need help building resilience, check out our flagship program called Physiologic Flexibility. This is a 3-month do-it-yourself program that teaches you how to maximize your homeostatic regulators, such as your pH, blood glucose, O2 and CO2 tolerance, and temperature. We give you specific action items through the program with the goal of becoming anti-fragile. If you want to become the inspiration for your friends and family, this is the program for you.